The first day always began with laughter, and the laughter was always aimed at him. Marcus Hale sat at the far end of the long metal bench in the Galactic Academy mess hall, nursing the kind of nutrient paste that could make cardboard seem like a delicacy. Across the table, a group of cadets from the Predator races had their eyes locked on him. They didn't bother lowering their voices. Croth, a scaly reptilian with a maw full of jagged teeth, bared them in a grin as he spoke. Look at him. Fragile. Breakable. The Academy lets prey species in now. The table erupted in guttural chuckles, some growls, some piercing avian shrieks that passed for laughter among the mix. Marcus didn't flinch. He'd grown used to it in the weeks since his arrival. Compared to the towering reptilians, the hulking ursine cadets, and even the razor-taloned avians, Marcus looked like a lamb in a den of wolves. He was of average height, wiry rather than muscular, his brown hair cropped close in regulation style. There was nothing about him that screamed strength. Nothing that hinted at dominance. To them, he was prey in every sense of the word. He raised the utensil to his lips with unhurried calm. If there was one thing he had learned on Earth, the so-called Deathworld, it was that the most dangerous animal in the jungle was the one that didn't advertise itself. "You're awfully quiet, human," rumbled Dargan, the ursine cadet seated 2 rows down. His voice carried like distant thunder. "Maybe you've realized what everyone else knows. You don't belong here." Marcus swallowed and finally met the bear-like alien's dark eyes. "Maybe," he said evenly, "or maybe I just don't feel the need to roar every time I want to be heard." The table fell silent. Some of the Predator cadets blinked, confused by the calm retort. Croth hissed with amusement. Varric, the avian, tilted his head, feathers shivering. The silence didn't last long, it collapsed back into cruel laughter, but there was a new sharpness to it. A recognition that the human wasn't afraid. The truth was, Marcus couldn't afford fear. The Galactic Academy was the only bridge between Earth and the wider cosmos. Humanity's place in galactic society was fragile, tentative, and still under debate. If he faltered, if he gave them reason to believe humans were weak, it would follow his species like a shadow for generations. He was young, barely 20, but he carried the weight of an entire world's reputation on his shoulders. The mess hall doors slid open with a hiss, and the chatter hushed. Drill Master Grax entered, a towering Saurian officer whose very presence seemed to draw heat from the air. His eyes swept the room, glowing yellow slits that could peel flesh from bone. He was not the kind of being who needed to command silence. Silence came naturally when he walked in. "Cadets," Grax rasped, his voice grinding like stones. "Today, you begin the field survival trials. You will be deployed to Training Moon 17. Your task, endure for 72 hours, maintain unit cohesion, and return with at least half your number intact." A ripple of anticipation moved through the hall. The Predator cadets exchanged toothy grins. Survival in hostile terrain was their proving ground, their chance to showcase natural superiority. For Marcus, it meant something else. It meant scrutiny. Every step he took would be watched. Every stumble would be remembered. Grax's gaze swept the room and landed on him. For a moment, the Saurian's eyes seemed to linger. His reptilian lips curled just slightly, as though at some private thought. "Remember," Grax growled, "tools and claws alike can fail. Intelligence never does. Those who underestimate will not survive." The cadets filed out soon after, armored transports waiting to ferry them down to the Training Moon's surface. Marcus boarded in silence, taking a seat near the rear. Croft dropped into the seat beside him, scales glistening under the cabin lights. "Hope you can run fast, human," he said, his forked tongue flicking briefly between teeth. "The beasts there like to chase prey." Marcus leaned back, fastening his harness with deliberate ease. "Good. Then they'll be predictable." Croth's eyes narrowed, but before he could reply, the transport shuddered into motion. Through the viewport, the barren curve of Training Moon 17 rose into view. A landscape of jagged ridges, canyons, and dense forests stretched across its surface, bathed in a pale blue atmosphere that shimmered like glass. The drop was rough, thrusters kicking against turbulence before settling them down on rocky terrain. The hatch hissed open, and the cadets spilled out, weapons at the ready. The air was heavy with the scent of ozone and iron. Strange calls echoed across the distance, high, guttural cries that carried a feral resonance. Marcus stepped onto the soil, scanning the terrain. The Academy had briefed them that this was controlled space, that all predators had been tagged and their habitats mapped. But he knew better than to trust perfect control. No system was flawless. And no cage was unbreakable. The group spread out in loose formation, predators leading the way with confident strides. Marcus trailed behind, eyes darting across the ridges. Already he saw signs, deep claw marks in stone, scat steaming faintly in the cool air, a broken tree with its bark stripped clean. Something big hunted here. Something hungry. As dusk settled, the cadets established a perimeter near a canyon wall. Fires were lit, and boastful talk filled the night air. The predator cadets argued over which of them would take the most kills during the exercise, who would return with the most trophies. Marcus sat apart, sharpening a shard of metal he'd found on the transport. It wasn't much, but his hands moved with practiced ease. "What do you think you'll do with that stick, human? Scratch your name into a tree so someone finds your remains?" Marcus didn't answer. He carved the metal to a fine point, then slid it into a loop on his boot. The firelight flickered against his calm features, casting shadows across his face. A low, rumbling growl that vibrated through the canyon floor. The fire crackled, but no one moved. The growl came again, closer now, followed by the snap of underbrush and the scrape of claws on stone. Marcus rose to his feet slowly. He didn't need to see the creature to know what it was. Though always in the tone of myth. Xerax beasts, apex predators imported from another Deathworld for training simulations. Twice the size of a lion, with jaws that could crush bone and blood so acidic it burned through armor. They weren't supposed to be loose in this zone. Some bristling with weapons, others suddenly less confident in their bravado. The firelight revealed the first set of glowing eyes on the ridge above. Then another. And another. The Xerax had found them. "Good," he hissed. "We'll see who the real hunters are." The first Xerax leapt from the ridge, landing in the midst of the cadets with a thunderous crash. Its roar split the night as claws raked through the air. The camp dissolved into chaos, shouts, screams, the sharp crack of energy rifles. But Marcus didn't scream. He stood perfectly still, eyes locked on the predator's movements, watching the rhythm, the predictability, the small openings no one else noticed. His fingers brushed the pen tucked into his chest pocket, the one thing he carried from Earth. To the others, it was nothing. To him, it was possibility. He didn't know yet how, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He would not die here. The first Xerax hit the ground like a meteor, claws carving trenches into the stone as its roar tore through the canyon. The cadets scattered. Two of the predator species lunged forward with reckless confidence, blades and rifles flashing, their movements a blur of strength honed by instinct. For a moment it looked like they might overwhelm the beast, but then the Xerax's tail lashed out with bone-snapping force, sending one sprawling lifeless against the canyon wall. The other was seized mid-strike and flung into the fire, his screams cut short as acid blood sprayed from the creature's wounds and consumed flesh and armor alike. The camp erupted into panic. Varric's feathers flared as he screeched orders, Croft charged headlong with his scaled bulk, and Dargan's massive frame became a wall between the smaller cadets and the beast. They were predators bred for this moment, their instincts pushing them to fight. But Marcus stood back, his eyes calm, watching, calculating. The Xerax was powerful, yes, but it was not mindless. It feinted before striking, herding them into mistakes, exploiting the cadets' overconfidence. Each move was deliberate, practiced, honed by evolution. The others fought with pride, with fury. Marcus studied it like a problem waiting to be solved. "Fire! Fire!" Varric shrieked, his rifle crackling as plasma bolts seared into the night. The shots glanced off hardened carapace, only enraging the creature. It lunged, snapping its jaws inches from Varric's head. Croft slammed into its flank with a roar, claws raking, teeth gnashing. Acid blood sprayed again, spattering the reptilian's arm. He screamed as smoke rose from melting scales. Marcus moved then, not to attack but to pull Croft back. The larger cadet tried to shove him away, furious at the intervention, but Marcus dragged him behind the line of rocks. "Stay down. It tracks movement. Don't give it targets." Croft spat through gritted teeth. You're prey. You don't tell me how." A shriek cut him off. Another Xerax, smaller but no less lethal, slithered from the shadows at the canyon's edge. Two glowing eyes narrowed as it padded closer, its claws whispering against stone. The cadets had thought there was one. There were more. The realization hit them like a cold tide. This wasn't a skirmish. It was a hunt. Dargan roared defiance, swinging a plasma axe into the first beast's shoulder, forcing it back a step. But the second circled wide, cutting off their retreat. Marcus's heart pounded, not with fear but with sharp clarity. The cadets were powerful individually, but scattered, divided by ego, they were prey all the same. He needed them alive, if only long enough to give him time. Listen to me. Marcus barked, his voice carrying above the chaos. They're trying to isolate us. Hold the wall, force them into a bottleneck. Varric snapped his beak in disdain, feathers bristling. We don't take orders from a soft blood. You will if you want to live, Marcus said flatly, eyes locked on the circling beast. Something in his tone made them hesitate. It wasn't a plea. It was a command. Even Croth, bleeding and furious, glanced at him with grudging recognition. The cadets tightened formation, backs to the canyon wall. For a few tense moments, the strategy worked. The Zerax tested them with darting strikes, probing for weakness, but the concentrated defense forced them back. Energy bolts sizzled into night, claws scraped against stone, roars echoed until the air vibrated with the sound of predators denied an easy kill. But Marcus knew it couldn't last. The beasts were patient. They had numbers. Eventually, one of the cadets would falter, and the formation would collapse. He needed another edge. As he scanned the ground, his gaze fell on the scattered wreckage from the earlier struggle. Broken equipment, sparking power cells, fragments of armor. Tools, if he used them right. He dropped low, crawling along the rocks while the others held the line. Varric cursed him for fleeing, but Marcus ignored it. He pried a power cell free from a shattered rifle, wires hissing sparks as he twisted them loose. His hands moved quickly, not with the strength of the others but with a kind of practiced ingenuity born from necessity. On Earth, survival wasn't about dominance. It was about improvisation. He jammed the cell into a jagged crevice, rigging it with a strand of heated filament. Primitive, unstable, but it might buy them time. He slid back into formation just as the larger Zerax lunged again. On my mark, Marcus said. Varric snapped at him. You dare. Now. Marcus hurled a rock toward the crevice. The beast, drawn by the motion, landed beside it just as the cell detonated. A blast of light and concussive force tore through the canyon, hurling the creature sideways. It shrieked in pain, its carapace scorched and cracked. The other cadets stared in stunned silence. You made that from scrap. Dagon rumbled, disbelief heavy in his tone. Marcus's lips curved faintly. Humans make do. For the first time since arrival, the Predator cadets looked at him differently. Not as prey. Not as weakness. But as something they couldn't easily categorize. The reprieve was brief. The second Zerax struck in retaliation, leaping into their formation with terrifying speed. Varric screamed as claws tore through his wing, pinning him to the ground. Croth swung wildly, trying to pull it off, but acid blood sprayed again, searing the rock. The smell was acrid, burning. Marcus moved without hesitation. He grabbed the shard of metal he'd hidden in his boot earlier and drove it into the creature's soft underbelly, twisting hard. The beast screeched, thrashing violently. It wasn't a killing blow, but it staggered the monster long enough for Dagon's axe to finish the job, cleaving deep into its neck. Acid blood spilled across the ground, sizzling as it ate through stone, but the beast collapsed. The cadets gasped for breath, bodies trembling from exhaustion and pain. The canyon stank of acid, smoke, and charred flesh. Varric groaned, clutching his mangled wing. Croth glared at Marcus, chest heaving, but there was no insult on his tongue this time. Only wariness. How? Croth rasped, scales still smoldering where the acid had struck. How does a prey animal fight like that? Marcus wiped the shard clean against his sleeve, sliding it back into his boot. His voice was steady, calm, without arrogance. Because I wasn't fighting it. I was solving it. The others stared at him as though seeing him for the first time. Varric's beak clicked, uncertain. Dagon rumbled low in his throat, a sound that could have been approval. But Marcus's eyes weren't on them. They were fixed on the ridge above, where more glowing eyes had appeared. One Zerax was dead, another wounded, but the pack was far from finished. Their cries echoed through the canyon, deep and resonant, vibrating against the stone. Marcus exhaled slowly, pulling the battered pen from his pocket. Its surface was scratched, dented, but it was intact. He rolled it between his fingers, feeling its weight, its balance. To the others, it was a trinket. To him, it was a reminder that intelligence was the sharpest weapon of all. We're not out of this, he said quietly, eyes never leaving the ridge. That was only the beginning. The cadets followed his gaze, and for once, none of them mocked him. None of them laughed. The night around them was alive with predators, and in the silence that followed, one truth settled heavy over them all. Their survival depended on the human. The ridge glowed with eyes, dozens of them, glittering like lanterns in the darkness. The Zerax pack shifted restlessly, claws scraping stone, breath hissing in unison. Each beast was a weapon of muscle and fury, and yet none charged. They were testing, watching, as though they too recognized something had changed in the canyon below. Marcus knelt, his body taut with focus, scanning the terrain. The cadets were battered, bleeding, their earlier bravado burned away. Crotha's scaled arm was wrapped in a scorched bandage, Dagon's breathing came ragged, and Varric sat slumped against a rock, wing trembling with pain. Their strength was waning, their instincts faltering. And still the pack waited. "They are not rushing us," Marcus murmured, eyes narrowing. "They are hunting properly now." "What do you mean?" Dagon rumbled. "They saw us kill 2 of their own. They're cautious. They'll probe until they find weakness, then strike all at once. If we wait here, we die." The silence that followed was thick. Croth spat blood, frustration blazing in his reptilian eyes. "Then what? Run? There's no place to hide. You saw what they did to us with just 2. Marcus's gaze flicked to the horizon, where the canyon split into a series of narrow ravines. His mind moved quickly, mapping possibilities, weighing risks. The predators were stronger, faster, deadlier in every physical way. But they had one flaw: predictability. Their power made them overconfident. Their hunting patterns could be read, anticipated, turned against them. "We use the terrain," Marcus said. "Force them into places their size works against them. Narrow paths. Blind corners. We turn their strength into weakness." Varric hissed softly, beak snapping in disbelief. "You're asking us to follow a prey animal into a burrow and hope the wolves trip over themselves." Marcus met his gaze without blinking. "I'm asking you to live. If you want to do that, follow me." There was no roar of approval, no sudden oath of loyalty. But when Marcus rose and moved toward the ravine, the others followed. It wasn't trust yet, it was survival instinct. The moon's light filtered weakly through jagged stone as they slipped into the canyon paths. Shadows stretched long, broken only by the gleam of alien eyes stalking above. Growls echoed, bouncing between walls, a constant reminder that the hunters were never far. Marcus led them deeper, searching for a place to make their stand. Every sense was alive, every detail registered: the loose rocks underfoot, the smell of blood thick in the air, the way the predators' cries shifted as they fanned out. They were driving the cadets forward like sheep, narrowing their choices. Marcus stopped suddenly. Ahead, the ravine split into 2 branches, one wide, one barely shoulder width. A trap, but also an opportunity. He pointed to the narrow branch. "We go there. Their bulk won't fit easily. It buys us time." They squeezed through, jagged stone scraping armor. The passage opened into a hollowed chamber, a pocket of space enclosed by steep walls. Natural choke point. Marcus's mind raced, tallying scraps of material they carried, sparking power packs, fragments of weapons, even the pen still resting in his pocket. Pieces of a solution. "They'll come soon," Dagon said, voice heavy. "What now, human?" Marcus crouched and began working quickly. He split open a damaged rifle, pulling free its power conduit. He stripped wires, twisted circuits, rigged unstable charges. Every move was decisive, his hands steady despite the tremors of exhaustion. The aliens watched, unease mingling with awe. "You build weapons out of garbage," Croth muttered. Marcus didn't look up. "On Earth, garbage keeps you alive." The growls grew louder. Dust trickled from the walls as claws scraped above. Marcus placed his makeshift charges along the entrance, then motioned the others back. His heart pounded, but his mind was still. He had one chance. The first Xerax forced its way into the narrow path, carapace scraping against stone. Its eyes burned with fury, its roar reverberating like thunder. It surged forward, only to trigger the unstable charges. An explosion of light and concussive force filled the chamber mouth, hurling stone shards in every direction. The beast shrieked, its armored face scorched and bleeding. The cadets roared in triumph, but Marcus did not. He saw what they hadn't: more shadows pressing close, more eyes gleaming. The pack wasn't deterred. They were enraged. The largest of them came then, squeezing through the blasted opening with terrifying strength. It dwarfed the others, its body covered in scars, its jaw lined with serrated teeth. Acid dripped from its maw as it advanced, unbothered by pain. The chamber shook under its weight. Weapons were raised, but Marcus knew they wouldn't be enough. Plasma fire had barely scorched the others. This one was older, harder, deadlier. They couldn't bring it down with brute force. His hand closed around the pen in his pocket. He felt the smooth surface, the small weight of it. An ordinary thing. The least threatening object in the galaxy. But in his hand, it became possibility. He tore open the pen casing, spilling the ink, leaving a hollow cylinder. He jammed one of the smaller power cells inside, wiring it with the heated filament he'd salvaged. Primitive, unstable, but deadly if aimed right. The Zerax charged. Croth leapt to meet it, claws flashing, but was swatted aside like an insect. Dargan swung his axe, sparks flying as it glanced off armor. Varric shrieked in fury, diving with talons outstretched, only to be caught midair and slammed into the ground. One by one, they fell back, broken, beaten. Marcus ran forward. The world seemed to narrow around him, the stench of acid, the roar of the beast, the pounding of his own heart. He dodged a swipe that would have cut him in half, rolled beneath snapping jaws, and drove the pen upward with all the force he had left. It sank into the creature's eye. The power cell inside ignited, releasing a violent burst of energy directly into the skull. The Zerax shrieked, convulsing as its body spasmed uncontrollably. Acid blood erupted, searing stone, but Marcus clung to the weapon, forcing it deeper until the beast's thrashing grew weaker, then stopped altogether. Silence fell, broken only by the hiss of acid eating into the floor. The massive predator collapsed, its lifeless body trembling once before going still. Marcus staggered back, chest heaving, his hand still wrapped around the scorched remains of the pen. The cadet stared at him in stunned disbelief. Dargan's great chest rose and fell, his voice a low rumble. "You killed it, with that?" Marcus looked down at the ruined pen, then back at them. "With this," he said quietly. "And a little ingenuity." No one laughed this time. No one sneered. The wordless fear in their eyes told him everything. They had seen strength fail, claws break, armor melt. And yet a human, fragile, unimposing, prey, had ended the most dangerous predator among them with nothing more than wit and a tool. Croft staggered upright, scales still smoking, his voice hushed. "What are you?" Marcus didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence was its own answer. But as he looked up, his calm expression tightened. The ridge above still glowed with eyes. The pack had seen their alpha fall, and their cries were louder now, furious, hungry. He tightened his grip on the broken pen. This was not over. The carcass of the great Zerax steamed in the hollow chamber, acid blood hissing where it pooled, burning pits into stone. The stench was thick, metallic and acrid, clinging to skin and armor. The cadets stood in silence, their weapons limp at their sides, eyes fixed not on the dead predator but on Marcus. The human's chest rose and fell with measured breaths, his hand still gripping the blackened remains of the pen. To the others, it was impossible, unthinkable, that such a fragile tool could have ended what their claws, teeth, and weapons could not. The ridge above still shimmered with dozens of eyes, but something had changed. The pack had witnessed the death of its leader. Their cries, once eager and taunting, had grown hesitant. They paced, restless, uncertain. Predators were bold when the hunt promised victory, but now hesitation rippled through them. The air trembled with their indecision. Marcus didn't waste a moment. He turned to the others, his voice calm but edged with steel. "They're not sure now. We broke their certainty. That's our chance. If we stand together, they won't come closer." Croft stared at him, scales blackened and smoking, his slit-pupiled eyes narrowing. "You speak as though you lead us." Marcus met his gaze evenly. "I don't care about leading. I care about living." Dargan's massive chest heaved as he gripped his axe. He studied Marcus for a long moment, then nodded once, a slow rumble of approval escaping his throat. "Then we live as one." The cadets formed a line, battered and blooded but resolute. Marcus stood at the center, pen shard still in his hand. He did not look like a leader, not in the way the predator species defined it. He was lean, unimposing, his body small beside theirs. And yet there was something in his presence that steadied them. Not strength of muscle, but strength of intent. The Zerax howled as one, a chorus of fury. The sound shook stone from the canyon walls, reverberating through bone and marrow. The pack surged forward at last, dozens of bodies flowing down the ravine, eyes burning with primal rage. The cadets braced. Marcus raised the pen. "Aim for the small things," he said quietly. "It's always the small things that turn the tide." The first wave hit. Beast slammed against stone, claws scraping, teeth flashing. Croth met one head-on, roaring as he drove his claws into its chest. Dargan's axe cleaved another down, acid splattering his hide but not stopping him. Varric, broken wing dragging, fought from the ground, talons slashing at legs that thundered past. Marcus moved differently. He did not strike with strength, but with precision. He darted into blind spots, slashing eyes, driving shards into soft flesh, using every fragment of wreckage as a weapon. His mind tracked the battle like a map, anticipating where each beast would strike, guiding the others with sharp calls. Left, Croth. Now, Dagon, swing low. Varric, stay down, wait, strike. The cadets obeyed without hesitation. Somewhere in the chaos, the line between predator and prey blurred, and they became something else entirely, a unit bound not by instinct, but by strategy. The Zerax fell, one after another, their strength turned against them. But the fight was not without cost. Croth staggered under fresh wounds, his scales cracked and bleeding. Dagon's axe arm trembled, every swing slower than the last. Varric's screeches grew weaker, his movements sluggish. The predators pressed harder, trying to break the fragile wall of defiance. Marcus knew it couldn't last. They had to end it before exhaustion consumed them. His eyes flicked to the canyon mouth, where the ground sloped into jagged stone spires. He saw the pattern of their advance, the way the Zerax funneled themselves through the terrain. He moved, fast and deliberate, climbing a narrow outcropping as claws snapped at his heels. From his pack he pulled the last salvaged cell, wiring it quickly with strips of heated filament. Crude, unstable, but enough. He jammed it into the rock face, wedged between fractured stone, and leapt back down. The pack pressed forward, their mass driving into the canyon, pushing over one another in their frenzy to reach the cadets. The unstable charge hummed, sparks licking across its surface. Down! Marcus shouted. The explosion tore through the ravine, shattering stone spires and collapsing the narrow path. Boulders crashed down in an avalanche, crushing Zerax beneath their weight. The roar of predators turned to shrieks of pain, then to silence as dust and rubble filled the air. When the rumble faded, only a handful of beasts remained, circling warily at the canyon's edge. They hissed, snapped their jaws, but did not advance. Their pack broken, their alpha dead, they retreated into the shadows, melting back into the wild from which they'd come. The ridge grew dark as the last of the eyes vanished. The cadets sagged, too tired even to cheer. Weapons dropped, breaths came in ragged gasps. For a long moment, no one spoke. The battlefield stank of blood and acid, the ground littered with corpses and rubble. Marcus lowered the ruined pen, its casing scorched beyond recognition. He stared at it in his palm, a small, ordinary thing that had reshaped the night. Then he tucked it back into his pocket, as if to remind himself that tools meant nothing without the mind to wield them. Croth broke the silence first. His voice was hoarse, but there was no mockery in it now. You are not prey. Dagon rumbled agreement, his heavy head dipping. No predator could have done what you did. You are something else. Even Varric, cradling his broken wing, managed a rasping hiss. The pen, a toy to us, a weapon to you. That is terrifying. Marcus did not smile. He looked at them, at their blooded bodies, at the smoldering canyon where predators had fallen. He thought of Earth, of humanity's long history of surviving against odds stacked high, of building tools from bone and stone, of enduring when every stronger, faster beast had wanted them gone. We're survivors, he said simply. That's what we are. The others said nothing, but the way they looked at him had changed. Respect, yes, but also something sharper. Wariness. A recognition that humanity's greatest strength was not muscle or claw, but the terrifying ingenuity to turn anything, even a pen, into the deadliest weapon in the galaxy. When rescue finally came, hours later, the Academy officers found them amidst the wreckage. They documented the scene in cold efficiency. Zerax corpses stacked high, cadets wounded but alive, a single human standing at their center. Reports were filed, records updated. But the story spread faster than any file could contain. Whispers swept through the Academy halls. A human cadet had slain apex predators with scraps. A human cadet had turned a pen into death. A human cadet had survived where others would have perished. In the days that followed, Marcus felt the weight of their stares. Some were respectful, some fearful, most unsettled. He didn't mind. Fear was a kind of respect. One evening, Croth approached him alone, his wounded arm bound in fresh bandages. He stood silent for a long time, scales glinting in the lamplight, then finally spoke. I mocked you for being prey. I was wrong. Whatever humans are, you are worse than predators. You're something predators never expect. Marcus studied him, then pulled the battered pen from his pocket, holding it up between two fingers. What's deadlier than a predator, Croth? He asked softly. The reptilian cadet tilted his head, silent. Marcus slipped the pen back into his uniform. A survivor with something to write with. He walked away then, his shadow long against the academy walls, leaving Croft staring after him with an unease he would never forget. And though Marcus said nothing of it aloud, a thought lingered in his mind as he returned to his quarters. Humanity had revealed only a glimpse of its nature that night. The galaxy thought them weak, soft, prey. Let them. That illusion was their camouflage. Because one truth would always remain, on a death world called Earth, survival had never belonged to the strongest. It had always belonged to the clever.